an architect, and he lectured in architecture as well, like I did, at the University of Newcastle, where he was involved in setting up a new digital MSc in digital architecture. Not a digital MSc, an MSc in digital architecture. He's executive director at RBA Enterprises, and so he's responsible for a lot of their products and services, the MBS, Construction Information Service, RBA Product Selector, MBS Plus, RBA Publications, and he's been very involved in new product development, including, of course, the MBS Toolkit, MBS Create, and product development in the National BIM Library as well. He's here today to present to us in 15 minutes the NBS Digital Toolkit, and to explain classification a little bit as well. So over to you, Richard Watson. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lou.
Richard, could you possibly stand this side if you don't mind?
Sure.
So microphone. Sorry.
Okay. I think presenting both the BIM toolkit and classification in 15 minutes is probably beyond me, but I'll do my best. But I am going to give you an overview of the work that we've been doing on the BIM toolkit. A key part of the level 2 suite of documents. A little bit of background. I'll show you where we are with that project, and then I've got a roundtable session afterwards where we can delve into the use of the toolkit in a little bit more detail. Very quick bit of background. 2011 government BIM strategy mandating 3D collaborative BIM by 2016, based on the hypothesis that the government as a client can drive significant improvements in cost, value and carbon performance through the use of open, shareable asset information. The key being that it needs to be general, it needs to be understandable, non-proprietary, open and verifiable. And many of those elements of the hypothesis are embedded in the toolkit work that we're doing. That comes through into the government construction strategy, published more recently, setting some really challenging targets for the industry in terms of 33% lower costs, faster delivery, lower emissions and improvements in exports. And the government see BIM as a key enabler of that. So what we're doing is working towards completion of the level 2 BIM suite. So we have PAS 1192, parts 2 and 3 for the capital and operational phases of the building, of the project, the CIC BIM protocol, government soft landings and COBE. The missing parts of the jigsaw are what we're working on in the BIM toolkit. Firstly, classification. So based on ISO 12006, a universal classification covering buildings, infrastructure, landscape, facilities, and defining levels of definition for the elements that go to make them up, so that we can talk a common language. And a digital plan of work, essentially defining who does what, when, through the project. This came about from a government and Innovate UK competition. There were workshops in January of last year, rapidly moving to development of a brief, and 3 teams were invited to do feasibility studies over the summer. We were one of those teams, and we were successful in winning the competition to take that work forward. Our team being NBS, which is part of our RBA Enterprises, colleagues at the BIM Academy, Northumbria University, BDP, Bang O'Rourke, Microsoft, Mont MacDonald and Newcastle University. But through the delivery of the project, we have tried our very best to collaborate with us and communicate with as many people in the industry as we can. We have an industry steering body comprising APM, BIFM, CIBSE, etc. You can see on the slide. But also we've been talking to everybody that will listen to us over the course of this project to try and get the data, the software, everything as right as we possibly can within the, frankly, hugely challenging timescales that we've had for this project. We've had 6 months to deliver this, and we pretty much lost the first month in terms of mobilisation and setup. So please, when you see the BIM Toolkit launch in beta next week at BIM Show Live, please be aware this is 6 months, well, probably 5 months work. I'm immensely proud of what the team have done in that time. The best way to explain what we're doing with the BIM Toolkit is to put it in the context of the workflow that is defined in PAS 1192. So we talk about the assessment of need through procurement, post-contract award and mobilisation, production, and into maintenance and use. You'll be grateful to know I'm not going to take you through each of those in detail, but just to say that at each of those points and more during that process, there may be a need for a plan of work, a digital plan of work that defines who's doing what, when, at each stage. And the parties to involved in the project change at any stage. So I'll take you through the first stage, assessment and need. So at this stage, the client is determining what they're calling their plain language questions. Is the building going to meet my environmental criteria? Can it be funded within my budget? They probably don't know the deliverables in terms of the detailed technology about that the building will be based on. The client produces their employer's information requirements. That's the detailed information about what information the client is procuring at each stage. This is procuring information, making sure that we don't ask for all of the detail right up front, because actually that's wasting everybody's time and energies. There's just certain information that we need to ensure that we procure at each stage of this process to ensure that we have the information that we need at the right time. Those information requirements are aligned to the project stages, and that can become part of the tender documentation. If I jump across into, this is what the toolkit will look like on the 8th of April when it launches. So I've logged in, I've got a collection of projects. I might be the employer at this stage, and I'm setting out the employer's information requirements for a new project. In this case, it's the Morning Sun Country Park, and I'll be putting in high-level project information. Where is the project? What's the title? What's the location? And then I can also input project details for each stage of the project. That might include when I expect construction to start on this particular stage. At this stage, I might not know who is going to be delivering this project, but I probably know what roles are likely to be involved. So the client can set out the roles that they expect to be working on this project and the tasks. So who should be delivering what in terms of information. And at this stage, the kind of tasks that we're talking about are probably those the high-level tasks about deliver me the initial assessment of the site and the tasks that the client will need in order to answer those plain language questions that they were talking about, that they set out previously. So at this stage, they're assigning those tasks to the particular role and saying, that's the information that I'm procuring and that I expect at this stage of the project. They can add their own tasks. So if there's a particular task for a particular project that needs to be done, they can add those into the toolkit. They can modify them, add notes. They can assign that this particular person is responsible, this role is responsible for delivering this task, but then we might add some notes in there to say other members of the team need to be consulted on those. Crucially, we're not starting with a blank sheet of paper. We've delivered template plans of work that can be used at any stage. So there'll be a template in there based on the RIBA Schedule of Multidisciplinary Services. We're also putting templates in there for infrastructure projects, and people can reuse templates. So if you create a digital plan of work, define all the tasks and the roles for a particular project, you can then reuse that on future projects, making it much quicker and easier to set these things up. So at this stage, those tasks and deliverables are assigned to the roles prior to the team being assembled. That information can then be exported, so we can go from the toolkit out into lots of standard formats so that you can embed those employers' information requirements into a Word document or a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet to complete the employers' information requirements document as defined in 1192. Crucially though, we can also export into industry standard format, IFC and COBie, so that that information is interoperable with other systems, and the bidding team could then take that and use it as the basis for creating their own plan of work, defining then how they are going to respond to the employer's information requirements, or take it out into other pieces of software. The key is that this information is interoperable. So that process of defining who does what when would happen through procurement, but again, the parties might be different. This might be the bidding team defining which parties are going to work on a particular project and what tasks they're all going to undertake, and presenting back their pre-construction BIM execution plan to the employer, so that the employer can then check digitally what's being presented against what was required in their initial employer's information requirements document. So we haven't got time to go through the whole process, but the same would happen. So this is the bidder now putting their team together, and we've defined what companies are associated with the particular roles. So if there was a role in there for the architect, and the architect had 12 tasks assigned to them, if that role is then assigned to what's an architect will pick up those 12 tasks. We don't have to have the same role or the same company associated with tasks at each of the stages, so giving us the flexibility that we can change as the project proceeds. Skipping rapidly into the production phase, here we're into the detailed design of the facility. The federated project information model begins to grow, and here the digital plan of work is really defining the detail of what, when and who. So now we're looking at really detailed levels of definition about what the facility is constructed from. So here we put a retaining wall example. We have defined about 6,000 templates for levels of definition, and that's both the geometric level of detail and the information level of information, each associated with the various stages of the plan of work. So that's the geometric representation, and this is the information representation. And recognizing that the information required will be different at different stages of the project. Early on in the project, you might be requesting LOD1, which is very high level description, right through to at stage 6 or stage 7, or LOD6, you'll be asking for the full COBie information. That's all set out for 6,000 plus different templates. What people are using for this at the moment are either in-house developed systems or the American LOD definitions, which is a 100-page PDF. And what we're trying to do wherever possible is to think about the use of that information further down the supply chain. So here I've got LOD2, which is a relatively high-level definition of the information requirements for a boiler. But critically, we've determined that it's really important that we consider the maintenance zone for that boiler early in the project, so that we can make sure the plant room is big enough. Later in the project, if we were looking at LOD5, we're into a much more detailed description of all of the components involved in that boiler. And exactly the same happens with LOI, describing the performance requirements right through to, at an earlier stage, right through to LOD6, which is the full set of COBie properties. This is not just about buildings. I know NBS is associated primarily with buildings and landscape, but we've worked with partners Mott MacDonald and others, and our own in-house engineers, to cover infrastructure as comprehensively as we can in 5 months as well. So I've seen a huge library of infrastructure LOD coming together over the last few months as well. An example here for jet blast deflection systems, but also it covers rail, aviation, water, highways, a huge library of levels of definition. Have I got time to cover classification?
You've got 2 minutes.
Okay, classification in 2 minutes.
10 minutes.
Sorry?
10 minutes.
Okay,
10
thank
minutes.
To get everything done, we'll research for them.
All right. Key to making sure that we're all talking the same language, and when we're defining who does what when, is having a classification system in the background that is agreed and comprehensive and can be mapped to existing classifications. So the ICS have been part of this project, mapping what we're calling Uniclass 2015, the completion of the work on Uniclass, to NRM. So when the toolkit launches, there are 3 classifications in there. One is the NBS codes that we use in our products. Then there's the new classification that we've been developing and delivering as part of this project, mapped to RICS NRM 1 classification. We've also looked at mapping to CESM. We've done some initial work on that and proved that it's possible. There's then a job of work to do to make all of that happen. Classification covers more than systems and products. It covers spaces as well. So we have space templates in there for 20 or 30 different spaces and some generic space templates. And that classification system covers, as far as possible, all levels of information. So in this example, we're looking at we're looking at complexes, which might be, in this case, is a holiday park, comprising a lake and chalets and restaurants, etc. Then we're looking at entities, which are buildings or bridges or activities and functions and spaces, and we've separated spaces from activities. So if you think about a school sports hall, that's the space, but the activities that it gets used for are both sport and doing exams and community activity in the evening. So it's really important that we classify the activities separately to the spaces. And then down into elements, so walls, bridge deck, etc., and then products and systems. Recognizing that classification has previously been hampered by people not always being able to find what they want to find in classifications, because classification naming has to be really precise. We've put a lot of effort into the development of synonyms, so that if I search for burglar alarm, I will find intruder detection system, which is the proper classification name. We're trying to push classification into the background to let people find the information that they want. So burglar alarms, if you search for green roof, you will find intensive green roof, and you'll find brown roof, and you'll find all of the other types of ways of describing. So there's a lot of work gone on into making the information as easy to use and findable as possible. And again, from production, that information we can export into the standard formats. That's defining what's been asked for, but we're not in any way suggesting how people will create that information. It's up to the project team what tools they use to deliver the information that's been asked for in terms of the BIM toolkit. But because we're basing it on IFC and COBE, that makes the available toolkit for the industry as wide as possible in terms of what tools they can use. We're using the standard formats to make sure that the data is interoperable. And that means that we can validate it. So if the employer has asked for the following information from the following people at the following stages, and the team has delivered their information, because those two are in standard formats, we can then do some verification that the information has been provided. I'm not going to go into the detail of that, but here's an example of Because the KB output doesn't include geometry, we've just associated each of the items here with a cube of geometry and loaded it into Celebri, followed the links back to the guidance on the BIM toolkit, just to demonstrate the interoperability of the data. But the guys at BIM Academy are now very nearly finished the verification, so that you can load up your project, your information requirements document and your information fulfillment, and then they can do the comparison to check, has all of that information been delivered at this particular stage. And you can view in the model, there's an online viewer within the verification site, which will take you to the bits of the model where there is information missing, where there's something not quite right. And then just to finish off, just to remind ourselves of why one of the key reasons why we're doing this, which is to ensure that the information follows through all the way into the management of the asset, so that years down the line, the information that was required to be procured for that boiler is all available, and it's all available in a standard format, because we set out what was required, when it was required. So when somebody comes to replace that boiler, we can interrogate it and find out what its ID is, what its parent space is, who manufactured it, what the model is, etc. So it's trying to ensure that there is continuity of information throughout the process. Apologies, that's been rather a canter through. I would encourage anybody to go to BIM Show Live next week, where you will get a much more extensive introduction to the toolkit, and you'll be able to try it for real. It launches in beta next week at BIM Show Live, and then there will be a more formal launch, I think probably in June. And over the period between April and June, we'll be picking up feedback from industry, both in terms of software and functionality, but also in terms of content and classification, and honing what's in the toolkit over that time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard.